Hiya, welcome back to Villefranche-sur-Mer in the south of France. I'm back. I made it back from Britain after my first visit in 15 months. So in this video, what I'm going to do is tell you what it was like to fly from Britain to France. I'm also going to share with you some insights as to what I've learned on this trip about how to travel in these strange COVID times, the mistakes I made and the odd thing that I got right. And I'm also going to tell you what I think about whether it's actually worth it or not traveling. So if you're intending to come to France, or if you're intending to fly from France to Britain, this is the video for you. Before we get going, quick reminder to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to receive notifications when new videos drop, which is usually twice a week. So, last Sunday I decided to make the leap. It was the first day that we could get back to Britain without quarantine. Britain had ceased to be on the Amber Plus list and had been relegated down to the good old Amber list, which meant that all you needed was to fill in a passenger locator form, take a COVID test here in a chemist, and book a 2-day COVID test when you got to Britain. I mean, what could be simpler? But anyway, those are the first stages. So here are my tips as to how you should approach this. First off, if you're flying from France, so this applies if you're an expat here and you're wanting to fly into Britain, or if you've even come to France on your holidays and you're trying to work out how to get back, what you need to do. First step, just go into a chemist and take a COVID test. The result will be given to you in 15 minutes. It'll cost you 29 euros. Now, what I learnt on my visit was that the chemist is great, very efficient, it's all done very fast, the result comes through very quickly, but the result is, unless you're careful, is sent to your mobile phone or your iPad, and then you're left with the situation you've either got to get it into an app or you've got to print it off. And I know from what some people have messaged me about this already this week is that is a bit of a challenge, because obviously you don't bring a printer on holiday with you, well, unless you don't have any friends. Do you know, there used to be a couple who took a meat pie on holiday with them. They were in the paper, Frey Bentos meat pie. They took the same meat pie on holiday with them 30 years. I think it was in case they didn't like the local food, you know. Very wise. Anyway, that's a side issue. So you get your result in 15 minutes, you put in your passwords and blah, blah, blah. Now, if you don't have access to a printer or you're worried about this going into the COVID app and all the rest of it, there is another option, which is just say nicely to the chemist, will you print off my form? And I suspect they will print it for you. And the other advantage this has is, if you watch my video of last Sunday, you'll realise that all this worked perfectly, seamlessly, until I got back home and realised that the chemist had spelt my name wrong. Foreign names, not easy to spell, are they? I'd struggled with Jean-Claude. I could do the Van Damme bit, I think. And that also happened to Mr. Harrison, didn't it? You see, happened to him too. So my tip is get the form printed in the chemist, not just because it's going to be easier, but because you can actually check the spelling. And then you won't end up coming home and having to go back and do the whole process again. So that is your stage 1, get your test within 72 hours. Stage 2 is come back and book the rip-off UK day 2 test for when you get back to Britain. Now you might think, oh, do I have to do that? I'm afraid you do, because you simply cannot fill in the passenger locator form until you've got that. So you do have to book a test. What should you pay for it? Well, we know what you should pay. You should pay what you pay in France, 29 quid. But, of course, we don't, because it's been wonderfully privatised so that, well, I don't know. Obviously, it's a better system to privatise everything that moves. So anyway, you will have to go on the site and you'll have to do your research. I managed to get one for about 50 quid. Howard got one, I think, for about 80 quid. A friend of mine told me that he found one for 38 quid, but it will take a lot of digging. Now the bottom line is, when you actually get the email confirming that you've booked the day 2 test, you'll discover that in many cases they all come from exactly the same company. Oncologica or something it's called. Probably run by Matt Hancock's brother. I didn't say that. But anyway, many of them seem to come from the same place. Now, I should just point out that my test, my day 2 test, did arrive on day 2. Very, very efficient. Came from the Montague Clinic, £50. Howard's test didn't arrive on day 2. Another friend who travelled on the same day, their test didn't arrive until day 2. On day 2. So I don't think it matters what you pay as to whether they're more likely or less likely to arrive. And to be honest, the crucial bit is that when you've booked it, you get this reference number. And the reference number you can then stick on the form, on the passenger locator form, and without that you can't get the passenger locator form to go through. So that is all done online. You stick the reference number on and away you go. Oh joy, oh rapture, it's time to stick the thing up me. Oh Jarka Pivy. I've got to gag apparently. Oh. Oh, I've got cramp. Oh, I don't like this. Oh. Ah! Now I've got to stick it up my nose. That's enough. Bloody hell. Now I've got to put it in this. I feel sorry for all those teachers out there who have to do this every day. Oh, yuck. And then you put that on there. And then you put that in there, and then you send it off to the man from Del Monte who's making trillions. Oh, and another thing. Test and Trace rang me about 6 times earlier to check that I was self-isolating. I said, but I've come in from an amber country, I'm not meant to be self-isolating. She said, oh yeah, that's right. The system just hasn't caught up. Howard had the same. Go Dido Harding. Now, that day 2 test, actually, I got the result of it today. I've been back in France 2 days. So it was a complete waste of money, energy and everything else. I guess the only possible justification, it was negative by the way, the only possible justification for it might be in genome sequencing. So I don't mind them doing the test, but I don't think it should be anything like the price it is, and it certainly should be a damn sight more efficient than it is. Next stage, of course, is well, head to the airport, because you can't fly unless you go to an airport, can you? Now, this is where I made what I regard as the biggest error, which was a complete amateur mistake. I decided to check a bag. Well, I didn't. What I thought I'd do is take a bag in the cabin with EasyJet, but they've altered the rules. You can't take a bag in the cabin unless you book a seat. This is a proper, big bag, not a small bag that goes under the seat. Then there weren't any seats, blah de blah, so I ended up checking a bag. Now, at the best of times, the queue for EasyJet bag check, unless you're an EasyJet plus super person, I do wish that if anybody from EasyJet's watching this, you'd like to make me an EasyJet plus super person, I'd love it. But unless you're one of those, you have to queue with everybody else. Now, of course, as I say, at the best of times, you can end up in a queue with hundreds of people, because it's not just your flight that they're checking the bags for. They've pooled the whole enterprise. So it's often slow. But with the added complication that the person at the check-in desk has got to check all your papers, your vaccination certificates. I should say, of course, everything I'm saying to you today is presupposing that you have a double vaccination. If you don't, none of this applies. So anyway, so the person at the desk has got to check all this stuff, which just adds quite a lot of time, particularly when people have only got this stuff on their mobile phone and they can't actually bring it up on the screen, blah, 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 and they get very stressed out and they've lost it, etc. So again, my little tip there would be print it off as well as have it on the screen if you can. But they will accept it on the screen, providing you can, you know, work the app. So anyway, that was mistake number one. If you can avoid checking a bag, do. Because you can check in online and you will simply arrive at the airport exactly as normal at Nice, and you will go through security exactly the same. And at security, they will not check your COVID papers, they will not check your vaccine passport, they will not check any of that. It will be just as normal. Everything will be normal until you get to the gate when you're about to board the plane, and one of the EasyJet staff will ask you if you checked in, physically checked in as opposed to digitally checked in. And if you say, no, I checked in online, she will then demand to see your papers. And that is the point at which you show them. Now, I have to say, it was a reasonably thorough check of the papers, but there is no scanner. There is no QR code scanner in use, or there certainly wasn't. So I don't know how they know that your QR code is genuine or not, but they read it, they look at it, and they wave you through. And that is all you have to do. So again, my massive tip is, if you can avoid bringing a bag that's a cabin bag, if you can somehow travel with a little rucksack, then you really will not notice any difference when you get to the airport with all this. Your life will be so much easier. The stressy bit for me was checking the bag and being stood in a line for over an hour in a mask, etc., etc. You'll then get on the plane. This is the next point of difference, which is when you get on the plane, the cabin staff will ask you if you have a surgical mask. So if you've got one of those fancy masks like I have, you know, from a trendy, because I like to keep up, a trendy manufacturer like Hershey's, you'll have to take it off because you've got to put a surgical mask on, because that's a French rule, not an EasyJet rule, not a British rule, that's a French rule. But the EasyJet staff did have surgical masks. Very nice, put those on, away we go. Flight takes off, headed for Britain. Only difference to the flight, you've got to wear the mask throughout, not greatly pleasant, but it's doable. There's a very limited menu. There's no menu cards because they might have COVID, so you sort of have to listen very hard as to what they've got on the trolley. And now this is going to surprise you. I finally discovered something about Brexit I like during this flight, and it's that duty-free is back. And it's actually cheap. So a litre of scotch is sort of 12 quid or something, or 10 quid, or it's even cheaper at the airport, I noticed. But duty free is back. So if you consume maybe 87 litres of vodka on every journey, or with every trip, and buy that many bottles, you might get the money you're losing from Brexit in terms of import duties on anything we buy from abroad, or residence cards, etc., etc. Residence cards. This is something I meant to mention. This is crucial. As you pass through passport control at Nice, if you are an expat who has now got a titre de séjour, then you must present it to the immigration officer. If you do not, they will stamp your passport and the clock will start ticking on the amount of days you are leaving France. We know that the rule is 90 days, you're allowed to stay, then you have to come back, etc., etc. Now I presented the residency card and they still stamped my passport, and then I panicked and then I went back and then she did some little crosses through it, which apparently made it invalid, that stamp. But they were very nice about it, but the bottom line is that the immigration staff are still getting used to this. So for the most part, they're stamping people's passports, and even when you show them the residency card, they then just sort of automatically just go bang, stamp. So you've really got to watch that. And that was the one thing I completely and utterly forgot to do in thinking about all the COVID crap. So anyway, you're now getting to Britain. Land in Britain, off the plane, everything as normal, go through to immigration, use the e-gate, don't need to see your vaccine passport. Whether if you actually went to a human immigration officer, they would demand your vaccine passport, I can't testify, but nothing was checked at all. Passenger locator form, anything like that, nothing checked. Out the other side, and everything in Britain was exactly as normal because the Gatwick Express wasn't working. So it was good to know that not everything had changed in the last 15 months. So that is the journey from France to Britain. That applies whether you're an expat flying from here, that applies whether you're a British person who's come on holiday here and is going back. That's the stuff you have to do. What about the journey from Britain to France? What about the journey from Britain to France, whether you're an expat returning here or whether you're a British person coming on holiday to the south of France in August or September, October, hopefully? Well, I'm pleased to report that it is much, much simpler. Providing you are double vaccinated and you have the necessary QR codes, etc. in your NHS app, or you've got it printed off or whatever, you literally have to fill in one bit of paper, and it's this that you just sign. And you basically say that you haven't had diarrhea, you haven't got a fever, you haven't been on an island, you've been in the same place I think for about 10 days, all of that. Very, very simple. And then you just sign your name. And that is it. That is the form for entry to France. You do not need a test. You do not need to book a day 2 test at this end. It will not cost you 1 penny to do it. And it's very simple. So, if you are thinking of coming on holiday to France, the first stage for you, providing you're double vaccinated, really is, to use a choice phrase, it's a piece of shit. Now, the big $1 million question, is it worth it? Well, this all depends on the type of person you are, the situation you're in, etc. I think the paperwork is not that difficult, having done it. When I was doing it at the time, I did find it very stressy because of the testing and everything else. Having the test here is a bit nervy because, of course, the infection rate is high here. If you picked it up in the week or 2 weeks of your holiday, then and you test positive at the chemist, I'm afraid you ain't flying for a few days. I mean, you could, of course, go to a number of other chemists and try and get a negative test, because these tests can be a bit unreliable. And if you get one that's negative, you'll be fine. So it may be that if you come, you want to sort of, in the last 3 or 4 days before you fly back, be super careful, but it may be that you're going to be pretty careful anyway. Luckily, as you can see from the crowds around me, that everything is pretty much outside at the minute, not least because it is staggeringly hot. It's 30, it was 30 degrees at about 9 o'clock, 8:30 this morning. So on that level, you have to decide whether your stress levels can cope with that, and do you have any flexibility if you had to stay an extra 2 or 3 days. The other thing, of course, that really stresses people out is the possibility that France goes back on the Amber Plus and they have to quarantine for 10 days, or it goes back on the red list, in which case they have to stay with Lenny Henry for £2,500 in Gatwick Airport. I would be very surprised if that happens, because if you look at the way the wind's blowing, not least with the British government's, is now assessing these things every 3 weeks, whereas before it seemed to be doing them every week or 10 days or something. So it is possible for you to go, hang on, Britain has just declared that France is still amber, and I've now got 3 weeks in which I can travel. And that will almost certainly not change. I mean, they're not guaranteeing it, I guess, if some spooky new variant popped up, but it doesn't seem massively likely to me. Famous last words. So is it worth it? Was it worth it for me? Yes, it was. I have to be honest, on the way to the airport, and I say in retrospect, I think it's because I'd lost my nerve on travelling, that the last 2 times I travelled have been so weird, trying to get out of Thailand, trying to get back into France, that it was literally like, it was like a restaurant that you'd been to where you'd had 2 crap meals and everything in my body was saying, don't do it again. But the minute I got through security at Nice airport, I instantly felt better and positive about the whole trip. And, it wasn't just that I was able to see my 90-year-old father I've not seen for 18 months. December 2019, unbelievably, I last saw him. But it was also the fact that to get away from your life, to I don't know, the thing that travel does is it makes things seem possible again. And I think during this whole crisis, we've all of us shrunk down, our worlds have shrunk. We've had to focus on the here and now, the small, and which is fine, and we can make a virtue of it. But I think travel is good. A bit environmentalist will be on my wall now screaming at my carbon footprint. I've had that this week. So it was 100% worth it for me, and as I say, the return journey into France was really, really easy. I got off at Nice airport, got the tram, €1 to Nice port, and Mr. Boo picked me up and Halloween was waiting for me, and it was just like an episode of the Waltons, really. What did he cook for my dinner? I've forgotten. Oh yes, we had duck. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe and hit the bell to receive notifications. There's a new video coming in the middle of the week which is all about Airbnbs here in Villefranche, where to stay, what to pay. I mean, you'd be mad to miss it. Take care, everyone. Bye.